We are live now.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Juvenile Justice Committee meeting. At this time, I would like for everyone to silence their devices, and we'll call this meeting to order. I will ask President Lyndon B. Johnson to give the invocation and Commissioner John Paul Young to do our Pledge of Allegiance.
Would you like me to call roll before they do that?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. You may call roll.
Sure thing. Commissioner Gage Watts.
Present.
Commissioner Talaferro. I see you, but I didn't hear you.
Here we go.
There you are. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. You had your device muted, which is appropriate.
Yeah, we got NT issues around here, so we're good.
No problem.
Right.
Commissioner Burrell.
Here.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Young.
Present.
And Commissioner Johnson.
Present.
All right. Thank you. We have 5 of 5 members present. That is a quorum.
Thank you, sir.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today. Thank you for the many blessings you have laid upon us. Father, we ask that you will guide us in the right direction and do the things that we should be doing for the citizens of Caddo Parish. Father, we ask that you also cover those that are still being impacted by COVID-19 and comfort their families. These things we ask in your Son, Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Please repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me, making the appropriate salute for you. I pledge allegiance, to the flag
of
the
United States of America
and to the
republic
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
All right.
Thank you, commissioners. Mr. Clerk, next item, please.
That brings us to agenda additions. Are you aware of any additional agenda additions today?
I am not aware of any.
Great. We haven't heard from anyone about any either. So at this point, it would be appropriate to consider a motion
So moved.
to approve the items.
Second by the chair. That was moved by Commissioner Roy Burrell and second by the chair to approve the items for telecommunications.
All right. And
Is there any opposition? I see none. That passes by acclamation.
Thank you. Then at this point, this is where I just want to let y'all remember that the certificate of teleconference is attached. No action is required. And that brings us to public comments, where we have not received any electronic public comments for today's meeting, but that phone number, should anybody want to call in to make a public comment, is 318-226-6596. Again, that's 318-226-6596. And Commissioner, how long would you like to give folks?
We'll give them about 30 seconds.
Perfect. We'll let you know. Okay, it looks like we do not have any calls that have come through, and we are at 30 seconds now.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
Okay, that brings us to new business, where we have 2 items. The first is 6.1. It is a visitor from Reentry Corporation of America, Mr. Reginald Stuman.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Stuman.
Good morning to each of you as members of the commission. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Reginald Stuman, and I am a partner with Signage GPS and Shadow Track, which is a worldwide electronic monitoring system that provides biometric solutions to court systems and governmental agencies across the United States and internationally. We have submitted the respective members a proposal for review and consideration that provides relative to the use of our electronic monitoring services for your juvenile offenders. It has been brought to our attention that in recent years, the Louisiana legislature has passed legal statute that requires 17-year-olds to be treated as adults, in which each, has placed an unfunded mandate upon many of the parish police juries and commissions, such as yourself. We're also well aware of the fact that you guys are strongly considering making additions to your juvenile facility, their entry report, and what we are presenting today will provide a cost-effective means for you to monitor juvenile delinquents that you have responsibility for, or the parish commission has a responsibility for. And you can stop me at any time. Specifically, what we do is we ascertain the needs of each specific jurisdiction or parish, and as it relates to electronic monitoring, and we come up with a viable solution that will fit the specific need of that parish. It is our understanding that you have somewhere between 24 to 40 juveniles that may need electronic monitoring service. And we do that through two ways. First, we have an app that we download to a wristwatch, and that wristwatch is provided by us to the offender for free. So we will provide them a wristwatch as well as the phone. The phone is provided for free. And we provide them also a wristwatch in which we will have two mechanisms of tracking those offenders. Our program is such where if there is a need for sobriety checks, we can provide them a backtrack mouthpiece where we can monitor their use of alcohol at any given time during the day, be it 5 times a day, 10 times a day. And also with the wristwatch, it allows for the probation officer to communicate with that juvenile offender through messaging or through alerts, or if he wants to establish meetings or let the juvenile offender know when their court date is. We have all those different kinds of features that we can provide through the watch or through the phone that we will provide to the juvenile. We have included the cost for providing those services, but I don't want to get into that now. I would like to entertain any questions that you guys may have as it relates to our product and how it could benefit the juvenile offenders in your parish.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stuman. As we have constantly, I see Commissioner Burrell has his hand raised, but this is an issue that we have been facing for quite some time, and we're not the only ones in the country that are facing the issue about addressing raise the age mandate. However, we have had some mighty challenges, I might add, with addressing this issue. And safety is our main priority, as well as providing the services necessary for our youth. Thank you for your brief presentation. I know that we'll have a lot of questions. I see Judge Casey Jones has joined us as well. But this is a way that we're looking at as alternatives to incarceration, and it is a part of a policy that we're already using. Commissioner Burrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have several questions here, and they may just overlap on each other, so I'm just going to state it straight out, and maybe you can just give me a general view. My question is, what is the effectiveness of your program to monitor and secure these juveniles? How do you assess your effectiveness? How has your program reduced the reentry rate for other juvenile systems? Like I said, it may overlap, but I'm just giving it all out so you may be able to do it compositively.
Sure. We are the #1 provider of electronic monitoring in the world, first and foremost. We have 25,000 offenders with the Virginia State Probation Office on our program as we speak. As relates to monitoring the effectiveness of our program, we have certain biometrics in our program, and we also have performance outcomes and performance measures that we've included in our proposal, which gives the commission a measuring tool that we can build upon in terms of measuring the effectiveness. For example, if we have one of the things that we propose to do with Caddo Parish is to look at the number of decreased juvenile arrests, the cost of monitoring versus juvenile detention. We do know that right now it costs the state of Louisiana $410 a day to house a juvenile, whereas with our program is actually $25 a day. And so we're able to track that offender 24 hours a day. And the other thing we can do also with our program, we have systems built and features where we can set up exclusionary and non-exclusionary zones. So for example, if you told an offender he is not allowed to go on Market Street, or he is not allowed to go on Linwood Street, we could set that up in our system and monitor that offender. Also, we intend to place a laptop in the sheriff's station as well as the 911 station in Shreveport in conjunction with the district attorney's office, in which we're working with also.
Okay. Now these measurements that you have, Madam Chair, just one more. These measurements that you have, performance measurements that you have, do you have performance measurements on other projects that you've worked on that we can kind of assess your,
Yes, sir.
Your effectiveness?
Yes, sir, we do. And we also service the U.S. Department of Immigration as we speak. We have U.S. immigrants on our program as well, too. But to answer your question, yes, we can provide you data and references to other agencies that is currently assessing our effectiveness on our program.
Okay, I would like for you to share that. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Burrell. Mr. Stuman, are these risk monitors able to be disbanded?
No, they're not. They're designed to be permanently placed on their wrist. In fact, we have bail bond agents that we tend to use initially to install those devices on the juveniles. But they're not intended to be disbanded. In fact, if you try to cut it, the fiber optics will immediately send a signal to our call center, as well as to the units that we'll place at the 911 station in Shreveport.
Okay. Is this a bulky device? I mean, is it something that will be noticeable? Is it user-friendly? What about the charging capabilities?
The device is very user-friendly. In fact, it looks just like an Apple Watch. I can give you a web where you can use the website in the proposal to go to it and see what the watch actually looks like.
Mm-hmm.
The watch does have to be charged, and in the installation and there's a charging kit that comes with the watch. And what will happen is our agents that we use to install, we will train the juvenile and their custodians on how to charge the watch properly. Now, keep in mind, we're also providing a free phone to the juveniles as well. So we'll have two mechanisms. We'll have a phone that will have an app downloaded on it that we can also track them. And we will also have the primary means, which will be the watch. So they will have no excuse for not being able to be tracked.
Okay.
With two mechanisms.
Is the watch immersible in water?
No, the watch is not immersible in the water. And that's one of the things we instruct them on is to how to properly handle the product.
Mm-hmm.
And what the consequences are when they sign the agreement with us for use of the product.
What is the cost on this, Commissioner Burrell? I see your hand raised. What is the cost?
Okay. There is an initial installation cost of $375. That's for the watch and for the phone. And they get that first month for free. And then, that includes the first month. And then thereafter, the monthly cost will be $750 per month. And that includes the monitoring, 24-hour monitoring of the juveniles and the staff that we will employ there in Shreveport. We have a location in Shreveport, which was 5403 Hearn Avenue. And
Okay.
so we intend to dedicate personal resources directly in Shreveport. This will not be an off-site situation where the people will be monitored off-site. We will have physical people there in Shreveport that we intend to hire and use our current staff to provide the monitoring services of the juveniles.
And they are available 24/365?
That is correct. So for
Okay.
example, if you have an issue where a juvenile has to go to jail at 2 a.m. and you want the watch on that particular kid right then and there, we have an agent that we can dispatch to send to the jail prior to them being discharged as a condition of their bond. If the judge wants to watch place on them, we can get that done at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stuman. I have another commissioner with his hand raised. Is Commissioner Burrell?
Yes, ma'am. Just a follow-up question to something that you asked about whether the watch is immersible. My question is the hygiene surrounding the watch, because if they don't take it off, then I assume that you instruct them how to deal with it, because I know when I have my watch on my arm, if I leave it on too long, bacteria and stuff will set up, and you definitely don't want anything like that. Although it's on your arm, you can still be, they could still be affected, and they could possibly even sue us if there's some disorder or eczema or something that's created from it. You all taking that into consideration?
We are taking that into consideration, and it's part of the rules and conditions. The juvenile offender has to attest to that he understands that they're prohibited from wearing the GPS monitor device in a pool, a bathtub, or in a hot tub, etc. But we also, from a hygiene perspective, we provide the training to them as it relates to how to properly utilize the product without incurring any personal issues.
One final question, and that is, you gave the $375 for the watch and the phone, and $750 per month. Is there any initial installation cost that would be charged to the parish, or just your flat fees?
Yes, sir. That is the cost that will be charged to the parish. It would be the $375 for the installation, and the first month's cost would be the $325. The $750 for each offender. Then thereafter, each month, it's $750 per month, which equates to $25 a day, compared to $410 a day to house them.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. I see any other commissioners?
Commissioner Gage, just before we move on, I did just want to note, that we did receive some documentation from the presentation that was just given, and would you like us to send that out afterwards, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, make sure all of the members and everyone who's attending on this call receive those documents. Is there anything, Mr. Stuman, that you need to present or share the screen with this committee?
In the presentation, we have included the documentation that the offender will have to sign, but if the commission decides to utilize our service, Then at some point, I guess our legal counsel will confer with your legal counsel to construct the appropriate agreement necessary to conduct business or effectuate business with the parish in accordance with your rules and policies and procedures. But if there are any additional questions, please feel free to contact me. We are available for any questions you may have or any members of the commission may have as it relates to our product and use of our product. And we will certainly get that information back to Mr. Burrell as it relates to the performance of the product from some of our existing vendors that are utilizing our product.
Okay, Mr. Stuman, we have a couple of the commissioners with some comments, and I wanted to make sure that I allow the Juvenile Detention Center director is here, assistant director, and Judge Casey Jones is here as well if they had any questions. I'll begin with Commissioner Lyndon B. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. One question I had was, you said it was $375 for the initial installation, and then $750 per month for monitoring.
Right.
All right, and then how much it is to house a juvenile for the month?
The cost that we've gotten from the Department of Corrections is $410 per day for the state of Louisiana.
Okay. And how much are we currently, and this is probably to Clay or one of the other guys, how much are we currently paying now for like ankle bracelets for monitoring?
Director Walker.
Yes, Commissioner, I'd have to look to see specifically, but we have two different companies that we work with for ankle monitors. The way that it's paid is we pay per day that it's in use. And it's something close to about $1 a day. It's not very much. I'd have to look again. It's been several years since we looked at that contract. We have a national company we've been with for about 30 years. And we have a local company we've been with, I think about 3 years maybe. And then that's the last time I've looked at it. I just don't remember those numbers. I do know that our numbers for detention beds per day is about $379 a day. That is, we have 24 beds and we pay about $379 per bed if it's being used or not, because the staff and facility are available to be used, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Mr. Stuman, do y'all have any other products or just the watch and the cell phone? You also have the ankle monitors too.
We don't use the ankle monitors largely because of its historical use and the embarrassment that it places a juvenile offender as well as an adult. We found a lot of adults are finding it difficult to get jobs because of the ankle monitoring or ankle bracelets. And so, and then with the juveniles in school, it's a bit embarrassing and difficult for them as well too. So what we came up with the watch concept, which makes it look more feasible and provides more, I guess, morale to the juvenile offender for something to use and also be tracked with.
Okay. One of the final question. The phone, is it like a regular phone that can be used to call other people? They can download other apps on it. It'll be a functional smartphone.
It will be a functional Android or smartphone. They will not be allowed to download other apps or obtain any other materials on the phone. It'll be a special phone that we will retrovert and send to that particular offender. And the reason why we send out the phones is because we ran into a problem years ago with offenders not having quality phones that we could download the app to. And so we decided to just refurbish our own phones and send them out so that they will have only our information on it and software capabilities.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner John Paul Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Mr. Stuman. What kind of compliance and non-compliance do you get with the use of these phones? It sounds like submerging them in water could be an easy way to disable them. Do kids do that intentionally, or do you find that they treat the devices respectfully, or what are your numbers about those?
We have found that they treat them respectively, but largely because there is some supervision involved or adjudicated supervision involved. I mean, that kid knows that he does something intentionally to damage the product of the phone. That his probation officer is going to come out and probably take some punishment against him, or go to the judge and request that something be done. So we don't have too many issues with destruction of the product. We do spend a lot of time up front providing the training support that we may need, or if something needs to be adjusted or we need to reinstall. You know, we've got bail bond agents that we can dispatch immediately to provide the support that we need. But to answer your question, we have not experienced too many problems with juveniles tampering with the devices or anything of that sort.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to ask, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner John Paul Young. So, Mr. Stuman, I see you, Commissioner Burrell. This watch is just not able to be swam in, so they could bathe and wash their hands in it. You just couldn't submerge it in the water. Am I correct?
That is correct. That is correct. Okay. And if something happens, we can immediately dispatch, you know, something, if there's a default or something that goes wrong, we can provide immediately another watch and install it on the offender if necessary.
Okay.
Yes.
And so there has not been any legal liability that you are aware of, as Commissioner John Paul Young was asking?
No, ma'am, there is not. We have not experienced any legal liability in 15 years providing this service.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Roy Burrell.
Yeah, my final thought, I guess, you know, being a former telecommunication engineer, in terms of supervision, you mentioned that it worked on fiber. After designing fiber, from a technical standpoint, if something happens to the fiber network, say like it's cut or something, do you all have a redundancy capability that it would come back online, where that youngster then will not, you know, would not be able to, you know, escape or do something like that? In other words, that the system comes back up. Do you all have a redundancy capabilities, or have you all run into those issues?
No, we have not. Like I said, if they try to cut the watch, the alert immediately goes off to the probation officer. We get an alert at our station. And in this case, in Shreveport, we'll have a unit in the law enforcement office, both the sheriff and 911 station, where we'll go off. And, you know, it will go back up immediately. So we'll know exactly where they are. Plus, we will have the watch on them as well, too. I'm sorry, the phone. So we'll have to track them as well as the watch system to track them.
Well, it's not the fact that they would cut the phone off. I'm saying that the service somehow gets cut, because it happens. You know, somebody's working on a line and somewhere, and then cut your fiber, your service to, you know, to your facility. Is there any redundancy capabilities like many hospitals have, or what have you, because it cannot be down? Do you all have that situation, or have you all run into that situation? Because it happens.
We had the situation to happen a couple of times, but we were able to still track the individual.
Okay.
We were still able to track the GPS location.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Commissioner John Paul Young, is your hand raised again?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Stuman.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have the capabilities for an employee, if needed, to testify in a court setting?
Yes, we do. And that is very interesting you brought that up, because that's one of the things that the district attorney office wants us to provide as well as a service. So we will have multiple employees that will be able to rotate and provide the actual testimony of the GPS tracking for you guys in a court or legal situation.
Okay. Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands raised. Is there any other comments? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stuman, for joining us today, and we will reach out to you with further questions and let you know our next plan of action.
Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Clerk.
All right, the next item is 6.2. It's discussing matters relative to juvenile justice and delinquency prevention.
Okay. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Director Clay Walker. I think he has a presentation for us.
So Jeff, is that you sharing?
Someone is sharing the screen.
Yeah. I think it's Jeff's office, and I just need you to, the next slide. So these slides, that's something, yeah. Can you all see that slide with the juvenile arrests?
Yes.
Yes, I
Okay.
can see it.
So every year, Shreveport Police, and you can look there on the bottom is the source. They put out an annual crime report, and usually on about page 8, they've got all of the arrests, and they've got it by age. And so this, I've gone back to the archives at the Shreveport Police Department back to 1981 when they started keeping the data. This is the total number of arrests by the Shreveport Police of juveniles each year. And so just to let you have an understanding of where we are versus where we've been, you can see it's quite low. It's actually, and this is going to sound strange because it certainly doesn't feel that way these days with crime, but in terms of total arrests, 2019, which is the most recent, they don't have the 2020 data yet. 2019 was 1,056, is actually the lowest that they have on record for juveniles.
Awesome.
If you go to the next slide, you'll see it broken down a little bit more, and you kind of understand why it's low. So this one, what you're looking at, the total from before is that blue line, the 1056. That's the total crime, total arrests of juveniles, but it's broken into these two numbers, part 1 and part 2. So when nationally, when the FBI compares, Shreveport to sister cities like Little Rock or Jackson, Mobile, Birmingham, places like that are similar sizes, they compare part 1 crime. Part 1 crime is basically the 7 deadly sins. It's murder, rape, armed robbery, burglary, things like that, the 7 more serious crimes. And what you can see in this, in that orange line, is that it's been relatively steady. It's actually coming a little down over the years. It's really the gray one, part 2, that's come so dramatically down. The reason that we're as low as we've ever been, major crime is a little bit down. It's the minor crime, which is primarily school related. What you're looking at in like 1995, 1996 is when the school system implemented zero tolerance. And that's when you start to see a lot more arrests for minor offenses. If you're looking in about 2012, 13, we peaked. That was the highest that we'd ever had in arrests, was 2012. It's the following year, 2013, that Dr. Gore restarted. And it's policy changes within the school system, I believe, that has fewer children getting arrested for those minor offenses. And that's why it's come back down to almost the original 1995, 1996 numbers. But that part 2 is more about, how we handle misconduct in the school system. Part 1 is the serious crime that we're dealing with on the street. If you go to the next slide. So this is part 1 crime. This is just taking a little bit more of a serious look at serious crime in Shreveport. You can see the numbers, they're trending generally down. What I try to do, because we're not trying to, statistics can kind of be manipulated, but this is literally every year since Shreveport's been keeping the data. And I try to look at that average line, the 591 is our part 1 crime average since we've been keeping the data. And we want to try to stay below average, and we want to try to continue to drive it down. If anybody has any questions, obviously interrupt me, but if one thing that may come to mind here, the 268 in 2019, I think you're talking about the effect of COVID at this point. The way they do this, you have to kind of imagine the police are they're investigating if a crime is committed, if a car is broken into in 2019, when they catch the offender, they then know the age. That's how we now know it was a juvenile crime. Well, the latter half of 2019, from July, August forward, they're still doing some of the investigation in early 2020 when COVID hits. And I think that's the reason it's at 268, is probably a fall off in the efforts to investigate in 2020 when COVID hits. I think we'll see that number come back up, hopefully below the 591, but in the 400 or 500s, obviously as low as possible, but realistically 400 or 500s once the effect of COVID is we're a little bit more back to normal. Next slide, Jeff, please.
I just want to stop
yeah.
before you go to the next slide,
Okay.
Director Walker. I just want to say that's just a major accomplishment to have the arrests that low in history. So I know that, as you mentioned, the policy changes in the schools have attributed to that, in addition to programs like the Families in Need program, and how you can come back to this later, but I just want you to think about how that family building and career shadowing program is helping to improve and reduce recidivism at the juvenile detention center.
Yes, the bottom line is the more you can do, the quickest way I can explain it, it takes a village to raise a child. Unfortunately, if we have a child that doesn't have a strong home, we have to build the village around that child.
Right.
And so all of the programs you just mentioned, those kinds of programs, that's what does it. And it is what it's more effective. I do want to address for all the, the concerns about crime right now, because certainly, hearing gunshots around town and certainly seeing a lot of the more serious crime, what you're looking at now, this is a slide of every charge by a juvenile since 1991 through 2019. And you can see, for example, theft, the darker numbers are the older numbers. Theft has come down. Simple battery in the early 90s, where it's real dark, we used to not arrest for that, and that's what went up. But you can see, this gives you some sense. The reason that juvenile crime is down so far is because the serious numbers are theft and simple battery, and then other is actually city violations, things like sagging pants, literally jaywalking, noise violations. It's just to kind of show you that the serious crime in juvenile, murder, rape, and armed robbery are small numbers. If we reduce simple battery, for example, last year, I believe, in 2019, when we're looking at the data, in 2019, over 900 children in the school system went to the school fight diversion program. So that program reduces arrests by over 900. And I believe in 2019, we had 5 children arrested for murder or attempted murder. So the very serious crimes, obviously murder and attempted murder, nothing more serious. We had only 5 though, compared to over 900 children that were not arrested for fights. And that's why crime, our numbers look like they are down. What we're certainly hoping about that is that when 900 children are not arrested, they're not put in handcuffs, they're not put in an orange jumpsuit, they're not brought to detention. We're trying to turn off the on-ramp, if you will, to crime. We're trying to keep kids from ever coming into the system. And getting involved in the system. So that's what we are happy, Commissioner Gage Watts, about those numbers being reduced so much. You can go to the next slide, Jeff, and then these next few, I'll just show you. These are about juvenile detention. You can see the bottom line is we used to incarcerate for lesser offenses. We used to have the kids that were committing school fights were being brought to detention back in the early 2000s. And so you can see our total, this is the number of children that police bring to the back door of detention. So in 2020, 395 times a police officer walked in with a child, obviously down from the height of 1910 in 2001. So this is policies working with the police department, the sheriff's department, and the school system primarily, coming to some agreements and some consensus that if 2 boys both want to fight, there need to be consequences, but we don't necessarily need to involve the police and juvenile detention. We don't need to involve jail. They still have consequences though. We're trying to use detention only for those more serious crimes. Next slide, Jeff. This one, what you're looking at, it's the same total number of intake is that top number, for example, 395 in 2020. At the end of 2020, if you got every child that came to juvenile detention in a gymnasium, it was 292 children. So the green is the number of times they're coming back. Is that if you get arrested in January, your case is processed, you get released, and then you get rearrested in October, you're counting twice there in the 395, but it was 292 individual children. And again, what we're trying to get to is we're trying to get that number low. I mean, obviously to reduce crime, but we're trying to just recognize that school fights and misdemeanors like shoplifting don't need to be involved. They can still have consequences that are effective, but they don't need to come to jail. It means that only 292 children in the entire parish had a serious enough offense that the police or sheriff brought them to juvenile detention. There's 64,000 children in the parish, and 292 came to juvenile detention in 2020. So I think the next slide, maybe our last, yeah. So this is what you are then dealing with in terms of the decision about the number of beds. The red line there is meant to signify the 24 is our total number of beds. You can see the reform efforts as we hit 52 back in 2005. That is the number that the fire marshal said was our maximum. And that year of 2005, we actually averaged our maximum for that year. In 2013 is when the legislature passed the juvenile detention center standards that set our capacity at 24. And so that we knew, we saw that coming, and we had to get ready for that. And that's what we had to do, a lot of policy changes and work with law enforcement in the school system to get that number down. And you can see we've been below that number since at or below 24 since 2011. And that's just to give you a sense of the update right now. Juvenile overall numbers are low. We were at the lowest arrests ever last year. We still do have, like the parish, an adult. And then frankly, it's across the country. I've talked to my
Right.
counterparts in other states and all over Louisiana. In 2019, we had 5 homicide type offenses, murder, rape, I'm sorry, not rape, murder or attempted murder. We had 5. In 2020, we had 12. So far this year, we've had 6. So that's the real, the tragedy that's going on is gun violence is up, and it is up in juvenile as it is everywhere. But 5 in 2019, we had 12 in 2020, and we've already had 6 so far this year. And so we have kind of a mixed report. The lowest crime in terms of arrests, things are going well in terms of reoffending. We're maintaining under 24, but we do have this more serious uptick in violent crime.
Thank you, Director Walker. Thank you for that presentation. And I think that you and your staff, I see a lot of hands raised here, are doing a great job at keeping these numbers where they are, working with a lot of these wraparound services. One question that I had was, are there any programs like planting trees or gardening that are being introduced to the offenders?
Yes, so we have, let me say two things. One, a great deal of credit to judges Ree Casey Jones, David Matlock, and Natalie Howell. They're the ones that are maintaining the numbers there in the detention center and keeping an eye on which kids need to be in and which kids are released. We are using all sorts of programs like that, Commissioner, just depending on the seriousness of the child. A lot of your truancy, misdemeanor, shoplifting, school fights, things like Shreveport Green is a partner. A lot of the different programs in town that'll do community gardens and that sort of thing. We have our own, within our own department, we utilize our own staff for community service, where we will take a small number of children, but we'll take children to a site in town and pick up trash. And I can get you a report on that. We actually keep track of how much trash we picked up and how many bags and that sort of thing. But we do that. And then depending on the severity of the charge, I mean, with more serious offenses, there are definitely programs. We use things like mental health counseling, after school programs, tutoring, all sorts of things, character building programs, up probably our more serious, the Youth Challenge program is very effective here. So we definitely use all of those kinds of community programs to try to get the kids reintegrated back into the community.
Okay, 2 questions. How active is military recruitment there?
Well, I got Ted Cox here in the room, and I can tell you it's probably more active here than it is most places that I know. Our YCP program up here, I think, has been recognized nationally as one of the best in the nation. It is for 16-year-olds and over. And then there are restrictions on what kinds of charges they can have, but it is absolutely very effective. And then frankly, for some of these kids that struggle with home life, I think, and the judge or Ted can speak to this, you know, a lot of times we try to go from the Youth Challenge to the military as just a stable structure. You know, one of the things we'd see with the Youth Challenge is while they're in it, they do quite well. If they get out and go back to a dysfunctional home, it can fade away. So staying in the military as they grow up can be a benefit to the children.
What do we have a program that help children or youth that are like 17 years old transition into independent living?
We do. There are several different agencies, and this is really it's connected both to parish probation. We also have state probation. So the Office of Juvenile Justice is run, it's essentially the Department of Corrections for children. they have state probation officers and they have state juvenile prisons. They use reentry programs. They have contracts for this. And so, for example, a child would go, if Judge Casey Jones might sentence a child to the state, to the Office of Juvenile Justice. And if that child goes to state prison, to Monroe, the Swanson Center for Youth, and say they spend 2 years there, by law, the Office of Juvenile Justice, 6 months prior to release, has to come up with a plan for reentry. Where is the child going to live? Where are they going to have to finish school? Do they have to get their GED? Employment issues, social issues, mental health, do they need to have counseling set up? So 6 months prior to release, they need to come up with that plan, present it to the judge. The judge has oversight over that, and then it's implemented. OJJ uses, for example, Goodwill Industries has a reentry program. It's vocational based. The Brandon Home that you all certainly know about and have helped to fund, they have a contract with the Office of Juvenile Justice. That's one of the places where the children, we call it step down. You're going from juvenile prison, instead of going directly back home, you may be at the Brandon House for a period of time before you go home, as a way to step down back into community life. So we have a lot of different agencies and programs that OJJ contracts with, and some that we do for that reentry kind of work.
I think it's advantageous for the community that is listening to hear these type of programs that are being presented for our youth. I don't think that they're always aware of all of the intricate details that are into the reducing of the recidivism here in Caddo Parish. So that's why I wanted you to put emphasis on those areas. And last thing is, if you could, if there's a breakdown on how many arrests were for youth gun violence.
So any given year, I'd have to look to see. We obviously probably had an uptick in that. I think the last time I looked, we were having somewhere between 40 and 60. And so we'd probably be in the 60 range now for these years that are higher. I think it's just been low, the high 30s or low 40s. What we normally have is, and the judge can speak to this too, because she sees this full spectrum, but you're going to see children that are breaking into cars because they're looking for guns, and unfortunately, citizens who are leaving guns in unlocked cars. So what you're going to see on Facebook and all the different social media videos, kids that are walking along and checking door handles, and young adults too. They're looking for guns in those cars. The guns, then the spectrum is going to be, kids that possess those guns, and we have a lot of social media, kids that are posting videos with guns, and looking. It's going to look like a music video sort of thing, where you look like you're, cool to other kids. You're going to see a lot of pictures with guns. We have a program where we track all of that and are keeping up with that, and use that in our work. And then unfortunately on that spectrum is children that then use these guns. So when I say the 40 to 60 is using those guns, guns that are being discharged, guns that are being carried on their person, guns that are being pulled on other people, and then unfortunately guns that are being shot at other people. So somewhere in that number, like I say, we have had 6 either attempted homicide or homicide this year already alone.
How effective has the campaign been for citizens to lock up their guns and keep your guns safely secured?
That again, in terms of really getting to the bottom of that, I think it's probably best to be asking Chief Raymond. The police have got a broader perspective on that. I only see really cases with juveniles. I frankly am not seeing much of a downturn in that. I don't see much of a change. It is still a problem that we're dealing with daily, is youth breaking into cars looking for guns and then posting those pictures with guns. I can say I would say within the last 2 years, I've heard a lot of positive talk. The sheriff and Chief Raymond, and you probably see this as well when with y'all's work. Things are most effective when everybody collaborates. The sheriff has been very good. We've had, that I can think of now, 2 or 3 meetings at CCC where he essentially invites everybody involved, every law enforcement, judge, commissioners, city council member. We get everybody at the table and start talking about the best way we can handle the gun violence. And so I'd say in the last 2 or 3 years, I've seen a lot of work to collaborate. Law enforcement getting together to try to get guns off the street has been very strong in the last couple of years.
Okay.
In terms of citizens, the message getting to citizens about about not leaving them in unlocked cars. I'm seeing some of that on social media, but maybe not enough.
All right. Thank you, Director Walker. I see Judge Casey Jones.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Mr.
afternoon.
Walker, I wanted to, I could comment on this, but I want you to be able to provide this to the committee as well, as it relates to the changes that are going to go into effect in December of 2021 with the children who, even though they may be tried as adults, if they're under the age of 18, they will be housed at JDC. I think that's very important for them to know. We've been trying to keep the numbers really low in detention right now, even though I've had some kickbacks from some parish officials. I am one who will sign an order to remove children with serious offenses from JDC, just because we don't have the room to house children with certain offenses. And so, but that's going to change December 21. So I want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. Mr. Walker, if you could provide some more information on that to everyone.
Sorry, I was muted there. I certainly can, Judge, and the judge is this is probably the most important point. We have right now 15 children in detention, and without speaking to obviously to their names or anything, the 15 children that are in, you can imagine with 64,000 children in the parish, the 15 children that are in are have very serious charges. I'm actually pulling them up right now just to see. So we're actually now down to 14 right now. And 3 of them right now are transfer children, and there are 12 total. 12 total in CCC that will be tried as adults. So there would be 15 if we have adding those 3. So the bottom line, Judge, is right now in Caddo Parish we have 15 children that are being tried as adults. 12 of them are housed at CCC. 3 of them are here and will be in the process of being transferred to CCC. So the trouble there obviously is with those 15, we would be at 26 in juvenile detention. We would have 2 children too many as of right now if those transferred children are all housed here in juvenile detention. And the real point of that, I know I've said this before, but our average length of stay for children in juvenile detention is a little over 10 days. The children that are at CCC are going to be there for 2 years. The children that are tried as adults, 18 months to 2 years. It's a long process to go through that kind of a serious murder trial. And as I say, we have 15 of those right now. So come December 2021, December of this year, the state will be at risk of losing money from the Commission on Law Enforcement if we don't follow the proper procedure with regard to these transfer kids. And that procedure is this: as of now and mandated in December, the downtown judges, the district court judges, have to review 7 factors to decide if that child could be at CCC or here at juvenile. And so in December, the possibility would be, if a district court judge that doesn't work in juvenile court determined that that child would stay here in juvenile detention, well, I guess the bottom line is we would not have enough beds to house all the juveniles that we need to right now.
So Director Walker, if I may, Judge Casey Jones. So December, this is March, of course, we don't have enough time to build a pod in that time. What will we do? Will we rent bed space? Where would these children go?
So the options right now, come December, the district court judges, they could rule based on the 7 factors that the children, we don't have space in juvenile detention. That's essentially Judge Casey Jones' point on this, is that we do not have the space, and that's why they're ordered to be at CCC, because we don't have the space. That could be the finding of the district court judge as well. And so we may be fine. If they rule that the child needs to be in juvenile detention, then Judge Casey Jones and Judge Howell would have to be releasing some of the children that are now in detention. As I said, we have 14, 3 are transfer kids. So the 11 children that are in right now, the judge would have to find 2 of those children to release to be at full capacity.
But if she could not, if none of the judges could release any of them, what would be our next option?
We really, at that point, there is no option. You're in odd territory here, but I think literally we would have to refuse their admission by the police when we reach 26. Based on the law, we could not allow any more in until someone is released. And so what would have to happen is one of the 11 children, the judges would have to release, possibly on an ankle monitor, which might be the safest way to do it, would be to GPS monitor. But I think the judge's point and what we've talked about for a while now is, these are children. If the judge could have released this child on a monitor and maintained safety, she already would have. So she's essentially saying that in her estimation, this is a child that cannot be safe on that ankle monitor. Unfortunately, we'd almost be in a position where we'd be forced to do that because we can't house anymore.
And that's exactly what I'm asking, because if all other options are exhausted, then do we have the capability to rent bed space?
No.
No.
The only facility in the area that rents beds like that is Ware in Coshada. And they don't have beds to rent. They are rented to all the parishes in and around Coshada. And Bossier has their contract there. That is not a contract we have. It's not money, frankly, that we have in our budget to rent. As we talked about in the earlier conversation, we are roughly $379 a day for our cost. I don't know what Ware's is, but it's going to be high like that. And so it would not be in our budget to be renting that bed space.
Okay. I just wanted you to expound on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know what, the judge's thoughts on this, frankly, the downtown judge and the juvenile judge that would have to be making these decisions are the ones that probably need to be speaking to this. Because it's that release of a child. When we hit our maximum capacity, you'd be releasing a child on a monitor that you otherwise would not want to as a judge. And that's putting the judge in that bind. Now we would do everything we could. We have intensive probation officers that can monitor that child every day. We have that GPS monitor that can keep track of where they are every day. And we would have to keep up with that child and then report back to you and to the judges if there is an increase in reoffending because of it. That's where we are right now. Is we track every child that is released to see if they reoffend. And so we may be put in that position in December if the downtown judges send the children to juvenile detention. And then the judges here are forced to release children that they're not wanting to. We would track them and report to you if that's causing an increase in reoffending, an increase in crime.
Okay. Judge Casey Jones, you still have the floor, ma'am.
Probably because I don't know how to take my hand down. I'm sorry about that. But just to piggyback on what Mr. Walker said, that is correct. If the children could be in the community, they would be in the community in the first place. Because I'm not going to, of course, put anybody in detention. It does not need to be in detention. But that's just something that we need to just seriously consider. I can't go too much into this, but there is an appeal that has been filed against me because of my decision to remove children from the detention center to CCC. So that is at the Second Circuit right now being taken up. Don't know the decision on that, and I said I can't get too much into that, but just to know that we're doing everything that we possibly can.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
We can speak to the district court judges, which we have, to ask them to consider the children staying at CCC, but of course that's their decision. And so if they decide, no, that's not going to happen, and then we run into December 20th, 2021, we're just gonna have to start turning children away. And so we just have to always think about that there constantly changes being made. And so we have to still be able to adjust and still be able to keep the community safe. And so I just want to make sure that, everybody's aware that the numbers look great right now, but though that could change going forward. And so we want to make sure that, we're not just, we can breathe, because we really can't. I mean, this is not just, I can never breathe. Judge Howell can never breathe, because we're always constantly making decisions when it comes to that detention center. So just want to keep everybody in mind and make sure everybody was fully informed of the upcoming changes.
Thank you so much, Your Honor, for highlighting that. That was a very important initiative that needed to be discussed amongst us. Commissioner Burrell. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, just a couple, Madam Chair, to the director. What in your assessment is causing this current uptick in shooting? Have you had any observation on that, or either the judge, Judge Casey, because we've had this spike. What do you see that is promoting that at this point, different from any other time?
The two things that I can speak to, roughly 2016, 2017, we started to see the uptick in guns being taken out of unlocked cars. And so we started to have conversations in the law enforcement community about how we address this, because we recognized that it would be in pretty short order, from stealing the guns to kind of play with them to then using them in a more dangerous way. The gun violence, as far as I can tell right now, is due to what might be called gang violence. They are neighborhood groups. They are 20-somethings that are leading juveniles, and not necessarily the gangs you think of from the 90s, which I would just say, to summarize, gangs back then involved a lot more money in drug sales. This is some money in drug and gun sales, but it's also as much to do with simply beefs between neighborhoods. This is over sometimes complete foolishness. The judge may recall, I think we had a 12 or 13-year-old group of kids that are riding by on their bikes. They have words with another group of kids. They ride to the end of the block. They turn around and they just fire shots at the other group. Not for any, it's just words they had on the street. No other particular problems, no drug sales, no serious money or anything. It is access to guns. It is because the youth that we're working with are flooded with guns.
So they just basically fantasizing these They just fantasizing this gun type activity and just doing it at random, basically, is what I'm hearing you say.
Well, and to prove your toughness, getting involved and all that. But it is the access to guns. I mean, when these pictures that we have from social media, a group of 3 or 4 boys, and there will be a dozen guns in the picture, everything from assault rifles to pistols with extended magazines and all sorts of serious firepower. And like I say, I think in the beginning, it was playing with them and, playing tough. And then it got to the point where you had to prove you were real. And so it begins where, now shooting at each other. And that's been the last probably 2 years.
Well, since you've identified, I'm trying to be in my problem solving mode, but it seems like statistically you've identified where a lot of these guns are coming from. Can we somehow create a program? I would rather put up money from the commission to try to work on a campaign program to try to alert the public and reinforcing the public that we need to lock up our vehicles if we're identifying where that is. Maybe we can put more focus on that. I don't know if it would come from your recommendation, from the police recommendation, city police, or the parish, but I can see educating the public more, because you're saying it's coming from a lot of these cars, and I can understand that sometimes the community is not highly aware of their complicity in this problem, that they may be able to help.
Yes, I mean, I think those sorts of efforts, I mean, I think that is certainly work that the commission could do to help. I think I've seen some of that work come out of the city. The mayor had a campaign about your 9 p.m. routine. It was something like that, about locking up your vehicle, securing weapons. I think that, maybe an intergovernmental conversation about that could be helpful. The city council, parish commission get together on that. I want to reiterate, I've got a limited view within juvenile court and juveniles. I think Chief Raymond and Sheriff Prater have got a larger scope on what they're seeing, across the board. But I think a unified message with all of those different agencies about securing the weapons would be definitely one of the solutions.
Well, it could come from your area, but into the overall conversation, because I don't see enough campaigns dealing with those kind of issues. I'm just saying from a citizen standpoint, and looking at TV or looking at the media, where you don't see those kind of campaigns strongly, and you've identified an area.
I agree, Commissioner. Yes.
Yes. And Commissioner Burrell, if that's something that you would like to introduce in resolution form or ordinance, and you can get back on the board, and I'll entertain a motion about that, because I do agree that was one of the reasons why I brought up that campaign.
Okay. The second question I'm through. As kids go back to in the homes, if it is dysfunctional, I know you all have some means of trying to assess where they're going back to, because I've worked in juvenile detention in college, and so I have some familiarity with that. How do we try to help mitigate those issues, or the home issues, or can we?
We can, and that is essentially, that is literally the job now. I mean, what you're talking about, that is the job of the judge and juvenile probation. It's taking every tool we have in the community, mental health counseling, I say parenting classes, they don't call it that anymore, but it's effort to help the families. It's vocational efforts with the families. It's finding safer housing for the families. Everything.
So we do have a
wraparound
program. We do have a wraparound program.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, we're good.
We do have wraparound. That is primarily funded by Medicaid. There are also some different parts of it that are funded by different agencies, but Southern University has some. Goodwill has others. Yes, there's I think roughly 150 programs in the community that we work with in some capacity. But Probation does those assessments, makes recommendations to the judges, and the judges essentially piece together that overall plan.
Thank you,
Everything
Madam
that's going to
Chair.
help the family and the child.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burrell. President Lyndon B. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was two different things I wanted to talk about. I know you mentioned earlier about as an option, the military, that y'all do some type of influencing to kind of go to the military. What about also of learning the trade? I know at one point in time, Southern University had youth build, and that pretty much has died. But I mean, is there any type of trade learn while they're in there, so that they, when they do come out, they can then try to get a job to become a craftsman?
Yes. So vocational is absolutely one of the programs. Everything from agencies that help with job interview skills, resume building skills, and then basic skills on the job. Rutherford House has the vocational program. There have been a couple of different agencies around the community that will provide those kinds of services. But yes, there's going to be a transition point where you're working with a kid and you're saying, you can finish high school, or you're going to transition to what's now called the high set, the GED, and a vocational track. And there are definitely some kids that are more interested in that. And it's a conversation. I believe many of you commissioners may know Ryan Williams, a very strong partner in the community at Seedlinks. And he's developing some of those programs as well, where we recognize, you got an older child that is already beginning to focus on vocational efforts and frankly, making some money. And that's what they're interested in. And if that's a route they'll take that will be law abiding, we're all for it. Help them get the high set and help them get the vocational skills.
So I guess my question was not really toward nonprofit having programs in place. I'm talking about more of that child or that juvenile being put into a type of school, so that they can get that training, that true training. I mean, with a nonprofit, you're gonna get whatever that instructor or that person that's working in that particular nonprofit, you'll get that knowledge. But I'm talking about the overall, the foundation, and then build upon that. So then they could become a craftsperson. They could go in working with somebody, and then also they could go into business for themselves right off the bat if they had the true training. That's more what I'm talking about. And then the second piece that I wanted to talk about was, you mentioned that if we got to 24 and there was 2 other kids that had to come over, that you pretty much could not accept them. If the parish, if I state this right, the sheriff runs the CCC, but the parish owns the facility. So if we get to a situation where we have overfill, we should be able to house those children in CCC if we own the facility. Second of all, when there's, I guess not recently, when they had severe weather in South Louisiana, we had kids that came up here that you house temporarily for a little while. So can we house kids temporarily in our own parish? If there's a case that comes up where you might have, say, 6 or 8 juveniles involved in an incident, and we go over to 24 with those 6 going in, we can't temporarily house them as well?
So you're correct. We had back with Hurricane Laura, I believe it was, I think 19 children from Calcasieu Parish came up, and they were in the gym for a period of time. That is allowed when there's that kind of statewide emergency declaration. It's not something in terms of the regular overflow in detention. That is about bed capacity and about PREA, what is called the Prison Rape Elimination Act. There are certain requirements we have to meet to maintain our license. So the difference of letting those kids from Calcasieu in for, I think, what was about 8 days, is allowed by a different emergency declaration. That's not something we can use on a regular basis.
Okay. What about the CCC?
With regard to
Utilizing
CCC, I mean, that's going to be more a question for Mr. Bernstein and Ms. Frazier. What we do now, if I understand it correctly, there is a unit at CCC that houses all prisoners there that are 18 and under. And so they have a separate unit for just these transfer kids, essentially. And you all, you do pay for that. In terms of how it's staffed, I think that's a separate matter. That's staffed by the sheriff. In terms of the problem that we have December 2021 that Judge Casey Jones was referring to, the question is compliance by CCC with regard to housing juveniles. They have to be kept separate sight and sound from adults. And they have to have other access to other services. And so, for example, school. Caddo Juvenile Detention Center is an alternative school in Caddo Parish. We have a principal from the Caddo Parish school system that works with us in our detention center. We have Caddo Parish teachers that actually work every day in the juvenile detention center. So we provide education services. The day the kid walks in, we have access to the school records and we know what work they left off on yesterday, and they start today, where they left off. So they get those school services. They don't have those services at CCC, and so that's
all right. Hold on, Clay. Hold on. Okay, yeah. So the issue is bedding. The issue is not that you can have 40 kids. They can be transferred over to the detention center for the classroom training and all that. But you saying being in the bed, being in a cell is our limitation of 24.
Well, no. In addition to it is beds in terms of PREA, but it's also staff ratio. We have to have a 1-to-8 staff ratio during the day. And so if you had 40 kids in for the school, the real issue budget wise is the staff. That's our biggest expense, is hiring staff to address that ratio.
So we have 1-to-8 now.
It's a 1-to-8 ratio by law during the day, 1-to-16 at night. Yes, ma'am. That's the law.
Okay. So if someone is out sick, what are our options?
For staff member out sick?
Yes.
We have to have that we have to fill in that position. 3 shifts a day, we have to have that ratio. And then we have also found just in terms of staff safety and children's safety, we are often over that ratio during the day. If we want to be able to allow all the kids out into school and out into recreation, we try to have more staff on staff that at that time on the shift. But if we get down to that ratio number because of illness or otherwise, we have to call in other staff and they have to come in.
Okay. So we do have the capability of calling in other staff, so we don't have to contract out anyone or anything like that. If there was like a mass breakout, I'm sorry, Commissioner Johnson, I just jumped in right there. I apologize. I just wondered why we were talking about it.
We do contract Northwest Security Services supplies staff. We have trained some of their security staff to work on the night shift, which has fewer requirements. But otherwise, it's parish employees, and they do have to come in sometimes to fill in if someone else is sick. Okay. Mr. Randall and I have, in fact, filled in ourselves sometimes for that work.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Commissioner Johnson, you still have the floor.
All right, so I'm trying to get this. So we limited by beds by 24 and by staff because we know we can only have 24. All right, but in the case where you could have 30 kids in our system, six of those kids could still be housed at CCC with the appropriate resources to take them over there so they can go to sleep at night. They get up in the morning and transport it to the detention center with the same resources that will match over there. They do the school, they do the activities that they have to do, and they go back to CCC to go back to the cell and be watched that night.
So I mean, I appreciate the efforts to solve the problem. I'm not trying to be argumentative each time. I feel like I'm being too negative, but so when the kids are over here, there's a couple things. The way we deal with security and discipline at any given time, if you've got the 8 kids out of their cells in a pod, and there's an incident, a child attacks another child or attacks a staff member, we have a procedure where all of the other juveniles go to their doors and they're put in their rooms. They're back on lock. So if 2 children are in a bad fight, the other 6 go to their doors. And it's behavior modification. I mean, they know if they don't go to their door, they're in trouble, just like the 2 fighters are. They go to their door, and a staff member is going to go and lock them down while we are dealing with the fight of these 2. If you had 40, you would have too many children to be able to put in there to lock down on any given time, if you're following me. We need to have 8 maximum per pod, so that if something goes down, everybody goes to their rooms on lockdown while we address this issue. I mean, Mr. Randall and I were involved in an incident just yesterday with that very matter, where you have this child having a problem. It has to be addressed. All of the other children then put in lockdown. So if you had 40, you have kids, going multiple in a cell, or kids wouldn't have a cell to go in, and you wouldn't be able to maintain the same kind of safety. It is
Okay.
really about that's the issue. Is a part of the reason why we do the 1 per cell. Number one, the law says that's our maximum we can have in that room, so we couldn't put 2 in there. But also we use them in that way when there are issues.
All right. So the law doesn't have any gray area for emergency or abnormal situation.
It does not as of right now, and I'm just trying to think this through as you're asking it. I mean, the bottom line is the law says that 2 children can't be in a cell of that size, and the issue is obviously safety for those children while they're in there. It is a level of kind of humanity in terms of it being too small a space. But the issue is if staff is addressing, 2 or 3 kids are all in one big fight, you lock the other kids down. And so if you put them in just for that temporary time, double bunking, the question would be, would the children be in danger in that cell? The problem would be while staff attention is on these 3 kids fighting, 2 kids would take advantage of that time. And in fact, I'm not trying to go too far down the rabbit hole on this, but we will have children stage a fight over here in pod 1, which draws staff to that pod with a real purpose was 2 kids in pod 2 want to fight and they want some time to do it. So they'll have a distraction in pod 1 so that we're delayed to respond to pod 2. That's exactly the kind of thing they would do. We would respond to a fight, and then kids would take advantage in that cell double bunked.
Okay.
I honestly, I genuinely appreciate. I mean, we're trying to solve a lot of the same problems. What this boils down to is the 7-factor hearing in December. The downtown judges, right now we have really good communication with downtown judges, between the judges here in juvenile court and the judges there. We're trying to maintain that. I want to have good understanding of all the judges, of what we're dealing with. We're trying to maintain safety at CCC in that unit. We're trying to maintain safety here. We want everybody under 18 to be getting these services, schooling and whatnot. So whatever way we can help with that at CCC or here, I mean, we'll do whatever it takes to help. But those are our limitations by the law.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner Burrell, I see your hand raised. We're going to wrap up here in about 10 minutes. I just wanted to say that I think that this has been a great meeting. It's allowed us to discuss some of the major accomplishments, as well as not be as relaxed as Judge Casey Jones said, because we still are facing a lot of challenges that are out there. I recommend that we continue to closely monitor the numbers at Juvenile Detention Center, as well as begin to make preparations for expansions or whatever will be necessary to house these offenders. I do have a motion, but I've already spoke. I'm gonna let Commissioner Roy Burrell speak. I think he has a motion also. Commissioner Burrell, I see your hand raised. We can't hear you. If you're speaking, you're muted.
Yeah, I believe if we go back to the motion that you kind of recommended under the circumstance to introduce a resolution to fund some sort of advertising or marketing program, hopefully in conjunction with the city, to for the public to lock up their guns. I think that was kind of the gist of it. I'm sure that Jeff can probably put it in better terms, but that's what I understand my resolution was supposed to be, to add some funding to do that, because we don't have enough of that. Okay.
Yes.
But my
so
question,
I'll second that before you speak. Let me second that so that we'll have the motion on the floor to initiate, in collaboration with the city of Shreveport, a gun violence awareness campaign. And I have a friendly amendment if you would accept that, and we can do this in one, and also reinitiate our gun buyback program.
okay, I would accept that.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, do you have that?
I do. I'm just jotting down the last part of your friendly amendment to make sure I've got that.
Okay.
And I think I got it on there.
All right. Now, Commissioner Burrell, you can speak on the motion.
Oh, well, again, what I want to speak on is to go back to something that Commissioner Johnson was saying about the housing portion at CCC.
Okay. Well, hold that for me. Hold
Okay.
that so there will, because that won't be germane to this motion. We'll go ahead and take a vote on that, and then we'll move to your next comments.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. At this time, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, one moment. Commissioner Gage Watts,
Yes.
Commissioner Taliaferro, Commissioner Burrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Young. Commissioner Young, I didn't hear a response. Is he dropped off?
I can't see him.
Yeah, looks like
He's
he
gone.
dropped off. Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, and this is an ordinance, right?
Yes.
Okay.
This is going to need to be an ordinance.
Right,
Yes.
right.
So
Okay, I just want to make sure.
yes, absolutely. That motion does carry with 3 of 5 in support of it and 2 absent.
Okay.
Madam Chair, let me speak on it, because we're going to have to determine the amount that we would donate in conjunction with them. That would have to be worked out too, I'm sure.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Okay. Now, thank you. That passes. So, Commissioner Burrell, you had another comment.
Just quickly, listening to Commissioner Johnson and listening to the director, and I'm kind of visualizing this thing from a logistic standpoint of this overflow and the problem that we got coming up on in December. It's, we won't have time to build a new addition or anything like that. But
Right.
Commissioner Johnson mentioned the CCC. I'm kind of visualizing what they did at Fair Park whenever they decided to separate different grade groups and they came in from a different entrance. Is it any way, just kind of throw it out for food for thought, that we could actually modify CDC to create a separate entrance? It won't be as much to cordon off a portion of it and create a different entrance to allow this addition of persons to utilize it. Because as I hear the director, you have to have staffing. You have to be kind of secured out there from the other facility. But even in the same building, you can cordon it off, kind of like what they did at Fair Park.
Right.
You know,
And
that
Commissioner Burrell, I know exactly where you're going with this. Judge Casey Jones and I, as well as Ted Cox, have been out, on field trips and basically just going around to see facilities and how we could utilize them for juvenile detention space. However, we have not come to a conclusion because none of those facilities have been accepted and approved by the state of Louisiana. However, where you're going with this is going to bring us to another meeting. I think that the committee, all of us should get in the truck, get in one of our vehicles and go and see what we can do to improve these facilities for the juvenile detention center expansion.
I agree.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. If there are no other comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
And second by the chair, second by President Lyndon B. Johnson. Thank you all so much for joining us today.